Hey, I'm your storyteller. I'd love to know where you're watching from. You can tell me in the comments section. When you are ready, lean back, and let's dive into this week's horror stories. I used to babysit for a family down the street. They were nice people, and I had done it a handful of times, so I felt comfortable with the routine. Their son, Timmy, was a good kid, usually well-behaved, though he did have a tendency to get into things he shouldn't. It was a typical Friday night. The parents were out for a date, and I was watching TV in the living room while Timmy was in his crib upstairs. It wasn't a huge house, but it was spacious enough. The kind of house that creaked and settled in the silence. It was after 10 p.m. and the night felt like it was stretching on forever. I was half paying attention to the show, and every now and then I'd hear something over the baby monitor. At first it was just Timmy making noise, little grunts, shifts, sounds that babies make when they're trying to get comfortable. But then, after a while, I noticed something else. There was a groan. At first, I thought it was just the static on the monitor, but it was clear. Something was speaking. I turned up the volume. The groaning was faint, but it sounded like a low voice, almost muffled, like it was coming from the other side of the room. I paused the TV. I sat there staring at the monitor. The groan was now a whisper. I felt my stomach twist. I told myself I was overthinking it. This stuff only happens in the movies. I had to check on Timmy just to be sure. I got up and went upstairs, glancing at the monitor once more before stepping into the hallway. The air felt cold as I crept down the hall toward Timmy's room. Timmy was in his crib, asleep. He looked peaceful. I checked the baby monitor to see if the sound was still coming through. I didn't want to just assume I was hearing things, but when I turned it back on, everything seemed normal, just static, no whispers. Relieved, I decided to head back downstairs, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. But as I reached the landing, the voice came through again, this time loud and clear. "Come back." I froze in my tracks. It was definitely not Timmy. I wasn't sure if it was a prank, if someone had somehow hijacked the baby monitor, but it sounded like it was coming from the room, as if someone was right next to Timmy. I rushed back to his room. I had to check. I wasn't going to leave him alone if something was going on. But when I got there, the room was quiet. Timmy was still sleeping soundly, oblivious to everything. The voice had stopped. I didn't know what to think at that point. I stood there for a second, looking around, feeling like something wasn't right. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as I stared at Timmy. Then, just as I was about to turn and leave the room, the voice came again. "Let me in." I grabbed the monitor off the table and turned it off. My hands were shaking. What was going on, I thought. I was sure that wasn't Timmy's voice, and it certainly wasn't normal static. I stood there for a moment, just trying to process it. But that's when I heard something from downstairs. The front door. It wasn't a knock, but the unmistakable sound of it creaking open. I felt my blood run cold. No one was supposed to be home until at least midnight. I crept toward the stairs, holding my breath, trying not to make a sound. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to go check on Timmy, but I had to know what was going on downstairs first. I glanced at the baby monitor one last time, but it was completely silent. I slowly made my way down the stairs, praying that I was just being paranoid, but the house felt different now, like something was watching me. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw the front door slightly open. Whoever it was, they had to be inside. Suddenly, the lights turned off. I wanted to scream. I silently hurried up the stairs again. I knew someone was in the house, but I didn't want to confront them. Besides, what could I do? I was just a 17-year-old kid who was babysitting a 3-year-old. I decided to place the baby monitor in the hallway outside Timmy's room. Then I locked the door and put some furniture in front of it to secure us, just like my dad had taught me. Then I called the cops. The dispatcher said they'd be there shortly. I sat there next to Timmy, just watching the baby monitor, waiting for whoever was out there to show themselves. And he did. I could hear footsteps slowly increasing in volume on the baby monitor. A man suddenly appeared at the end of the hallway. He walked slowly towards the baby monitor. I could feel the panic rising in me. He picked it up and said, "Are you going to open the door for me, or do I have to break it down?" "I know you are in there." I yelled at him and told him to leave us alone and that the cops are on their way. That just made him angry. He started pulling at the door handle, and when he couldn't open it, he started pounding on it. Timmy was now awake and crying. I tried to comfort him, but I was crying too. I feared for my own life and Timmy's. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" I yelled out as tears streamed down my face. "Are you crying? Oh, this is going to be enjoyable for me. I like when they cry," he said and laughed. The door was violently shaking. The hinges were starting to give in. "Please, please leave us alone. We won't say anything," I cried. He didn't care. He kept going, and just as I thought he would break through the door, I saw blue lights outside the window. The police came rushing into the house. I yelled, "We're up here." Then I heard them, "Police, get down on the ground." After they cuffed and removed him, they assured me it was okay to unlock the door. I held Timmy in my arms and practically threw myself into the arms of the officer. They calmed me down and told me I did great, and that I was the reason Timmy and I were okay. Timmy's parents came home shortly after. The police had called them. They rushed over to us and gave us a hug and thanked me for what I did. From what I heard, the man was a suspected murderer. He is now awaiting trial. I hope he gets locked up for good after what he put us through. It scares me to think what would have happened if I hadn't gone upstairs when I did that night. I was excited when I booked the Airbnb for my weekend getaway. It was my first time using the service. After a long week at work, I wanted some alone time, and this cozy apartment in the heart of the city seemed perfect. It had great reviews, beautiful decor, and was close to some of my favorite spots, and it was okay for young people like myself to rent it. Apparently some Airbnbs won't rent to people under the age of 25. I just turned 21 a couple of weeks before renting, so it was perfect. I arrived late in the evening, and after a brief tour from the host, I settled in, eager to unwind. The apartment was stunning, with exposed brick walls and vintage furnishings. However, as I settled in, I couldn't shake an odd feeling. The host, a middle-aged man named Gary, had been a bit too friendly, lingering just a little too long as he showed me around. He kept mentioning how the apartment was a safe space, especially for young girls like me, as he put it, which felt strange but harmless. As I unpacked, I noticed a really small camera mounted on the wall in the bathroom. It blended in and was hard to see. At first glance, I thought it was a quirky addition, perhaps part of the decor. I remembered reading in the listing that the owner had a background in photography. But as I stood in front of the mirror, a knot of unease formed in my stomach. What was the camera for? Not sure if it was part of the decor, I threw a towel on it and decided to focus on relaxing. After a long shower, I got dressed and went to relax on the couch. But I kept thinking about the camera in the bathroom. Later that evening, I was scrolling through my phone, and a thought struck me. What if the camera was recording? A shiver ran down my spine as I wondered if it was some weird voyeuristic installation. Unable to resist, I decided to investigate further. I grabbed my laptop and sat down on the floor of the bathroom, staring at the camera. I had no idea how to access whatever footage it might be recording, but I felt an overwhelming urge to uncover the truth. I dug through my backpack for a USB cable, thinking I could connect my laptop to the camera somehow. As I fiddled with the wires, I caught my reflection in the mirror, and my heart skipped a beat. There was a brief flicker of movement behind me, just in my periphery. I whipped around, but there was nothing there, just the bathroom door, slightly open. I took a deep breath, willing myself to calm down. I turned back to the camera, finally managing to connect the cable. With trembling fingers, I opened a file on my laptop, but instead of footage, it was just a series of images that were grainy and distorted. My stomach churned as I realized they were photos of the bathroom taken from different angles at various times. Then I noticed something chilling. The timestamps on the images were all from the past week. Suddenly, a noise broke the silence as Gary announced himself. I was shocked. My instincts screamed for me to hide the laptop. I quickly disconnected the IT, slipping it under the sink just as the bathroom door swung open. Gary stood there, smiling. "Everything okay in here?" Yeah, just checking out the decor," I stammered, forcing a smile. I felt like I was suffocating under his gaze. "Good. I hope you're enjoying your stay. Let me know if you need anything." He lingered for a moment longer than necessary before leaving. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. What was he doing in the apartment now? I was supposed to have it for myself. I should have said something to him. I'm pretty sure it was illegal for him to just enter unannounced, but being my young, dumb self, I didn't say anything. As Gary's footsteps faded down the hall, I took a deep breath. I couldn't stay in the bathroom any longer, so I gathered my things and stepped back into the living room. The images on my laptop haunted me. Who had been taking those pictures, and why? And why did Gary just enter the apartment? I decided to keep the laptop close, so I tucked it beneath the throw pillow on the couch, just in case. I needed a plan. Maybe I should check the apartment for other hidden cameras. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that I was being watched. I started my search in the living room, looking behind picture frames and under furniture. Everything seemed normal until I reached a small bookshelf near the window. As I moved a few books aside, I noticed something shiny peeking out from behind a thick novel. I pulled it out, my heart sinking as I realized it was another camera. This one looked newer and more sophisticated. There was a piece of black tape on it. I removed it and discovered a blinking red light that suggested it was active. I quickly shoved it back behind the book. I had to get out of there, but I couldn't just leave. I needed real evidence. I returned to the bathroom with my laptop. I flipped it open, hoping to find something useful. As I scrolled through the distorted images, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Gary. "Hope you're settling in well. Let me know if you need anything." My hands were shaking as I stared at the screen. Something about the way he phrased it felt menacing. I decided I couldn't stay in the apartment any longer. I needed to call the police and report what I found, but I couldn't risk letting Gary know. I decided I would head to the nearest cafe to make the call. I grabbed my things and made my way to the door, but just as I reached for the handle, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. Fearing it was Gary again, I ducked into the closet beside the front door, hoping to remain hidden. As I listened to Gary's footsteps get closer, I began to fear for my life. If he knew I had found the cameras, he'd surely not let me get away. "Where are you?" he called out playfully, and I could hear him moving around the apartment. "I know you're in here." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I tried to figure out what options I had. I knew it was only a matter of time before he found me. I could try to make a run for it, but if he caught me, I didn't know what he might do. I listened as he continued to search. I could hear him open and closing drawers, which I thought was weird, as he surely knew I wouldn't be able to fit in any drawers. That's when I realized he probably had armed himself with a knife from the kitchen drawers. Then I heard the soft click of the bathroom door opening again. "Come on out, I promise I won't bite," Gary called out. I swallowed hard, debating whether to stay hidden or make a break for the door. Just then I heard a muffled noise from the bathroom, like something had fallen. Gary's footsteps turned toward the sound, and I knew this was my chance. I pushed the closet door open slowly, peering out to see Gary's back turned toward me in the bathroom. I took a deep breath, gathering all the courage I had, and sprinted toward the front door, flinging it open and sprinting down the hallway. I kept sprinting further than I thought I was able to. I ran toward the nearest streetlight, desperate for safety. I reached for my phone and dialed the police. "There's a man in my Airbnb who's been recording me without my consent. I think he might be armed with a knife." The operator assured me help was on the way, but I didn't feel safe yet. I was standing alone in the middle of the street. As I waited for the police to arrive, I looked around the corner. I could see the apartment from where I was standing. Everything was dark inside. I didn't know where Gary was. I could hear the sound of sirens in the distance, but I knew I wasn't safe yet. I couldn't let him catch me again. The cops arrived, and it turns out Gary was still in the apartment. I bet he was trying to delete all the creepy photos he had taken. He was arrested, and after giving my statement to the police, I was let go. They offered to pay for a hotel room, which I gladly said yes to. In that moment, I vowed to never use Airbnb again. The thought of that apartment and Gary and what he would have done to me if he had caught me, I don't want to think about it. I had been driving for hours. The only company I had was my rig and rumble of the engine. I couldn't see much except for the faint reflection of my headlights on the empty road ahead. The only sound in the cab, aside from the engine, was the occasional crackle from the CB radio. I reached over to adjust the dial, but there was nothing on the airwaves, just static. Until suddenly, all at once, there was a voice. "Hey there, stranger. You rolling through mile marker 217. I jumped, my hand instinctively gripping the wheel tighter. I hadn't seen another truck for miles. I hadn't even seen a car pass by. My heart rate picked up. I leaned into the radio, pressing the mic button. "Yeah, just past it. Who's out there?" The static crackled, then several voices spoke at once, as if they were all part of a larger group, waiting for their turn. "Just some road warriors keeping each other company," one voice said. "You running solo out here, pal?" "Yeah," I said, glancing nervously at the dark road ahead. "Been a quiet night, just me and my rig." Another voice piped in, a little lighter than the first. "Not anymore, it seems. Why don't you roll with us? We're heading to the next stop up the road, coffee's on us." I exhaled in relief. Finally, some company. The isolation on the road always got to me, and a little friendly chatter could go a long way to break up the monotony. I chuckled. "Sounds good. What's the stop?" "You'll see it up ahead. Just follow the road. We'll be there before you know it." I continued to drive, my nerves settling as the banter flowed between the voices. The guys on the other end were joking, swapping stories about bad weather and strange loads. They sounded like real truckers sharing the road on a long haul. A few miles later, a sign for the truck stop blinked into view. It was barely visible in the distance. "See you boys soon," I said into the mic, tapping the wheel as I neared the stop. There was a long pause. "See you there," one of them finally responded. But it sounded distant now, like their voices was fading. The static returned, crackling louder until it became an eerie silence. "Hello," I said, but no one answered. I tried again, turning the knob, but the radio was dead. I pulled into the truck stop, expecting to see the convoy of at least 3 rigs lined up under the dim lights of the parking lot, but the lot was empty, not a single truck in sight. I rolled my window down. The truck stop was quiet, unnervingly quiet. I walked toward the small diner at the corner of the lot. Inside, the place was empty, save for the elderly man behind the counter. He barely looked up when I entered, but his eyes followed me as I walked to the counter. "Evening?" I said, trying to break the ice. He grunted in reply, wiping down a mug with a rag. "Did a convoy just pull in here? 3 trucks?" I asked, glancing out the window toward the empty lot. The old man's hand froze mid-wipe, and he stared at me for a long moment. He set the rag down and leaned toward me. "You're not the first to hear them." I didn't understand what he meant. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, glancing around the empty diner as if checking to see if anyone else was listening. "Couple years back, there was a wreck out there." He nodded toward the highway outside. "Big pileup. 3 trucks, all tangled up. None of the drivers made it. They were gone, just like that." I swallowed hard, uneasy. That's awful. But you think they don't know they're gone," he interrupted, his voice growing softer. "Some folks say they still haunt the road, Still talk on the radio like they're out there, still looking for someone to join them, like they're stuck in a loop running their routes, talking to whoever's crazy enough to listen. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I was trying to make sense of what the man was saying. I glanced around the diner again. You mean, their voices on the radio? They're real, but not? The old man looked at me, his eyes filled with a strange sorrow. They're real, all right. Some say it's just the dead trying to reach out. You're lucky if they don't follow you, son. I didn't know what to say. I turned away from the counter and walked quickly back to my truck. I climbed into the cab. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. I wanted to get the hell out of there. As I drove back down the empty highway, my fingers hovered over the CB, but I left it off. I didn't need to hear their voices again. I didn't want to hear the sound of truckers who never made it to their next stop. I never heard from them again. And every time I pass that stretch of road, I make sure to turn off the CB. I take Baxter for a walk every evening just before dark. He's a restless golden retriever full of energy, and if I skip even one walk, he paces around the apartment like a caged animal. The trail behind my complex is usually peaceful at this hour, just the occasional jogger or someone walking their own dog. This one night, however, the woods felt different. Everything seemed quieter than usual. All I could really hear was the crunch of my boots on the dirt path and the light rustling of Baxter's paws through fallen leaves. Suddenly, I heard something. A second set of footsteps. I slowed down. They stopped. I glanced over my shoulder, but the path behind me was empty. Maybe I imagined it. Shaking it off, I kept walking, but Baxter's ears were up now. His body was tense. He felt it too. His tail was normally wagging, but now it was stiff. The fur along his back was bristling. He glanced back every few steps, eyes locked on something I couldn't see. I told myself it's nothing. I've taken this path 100 times without anything happening. Then I heard it again. But this time, it was unmistakable. It was the sound of footsteps crunching leaves, not behind me, but off to the side in the trees. Whoever it is, they're not on the trail. They're in the woods, walking parallel to me. I stopped, and so did they. A silence stretches between me and whatever's out there. I scanned the trees, searching for movement, for any sign of a person or an animal. But I couldn't see anything unusual. I swallowed hard and started walking again, faster now. Baxter whines. I could tell he didn't want to be there anymore. Neither did I. Then a sharp rustling to my left caught my attention. It was not the wind, not a deer. I turned my head, dread curling in my stomach. That's when I saw it. A man, half hidden behind a tree, standing completely still, just watching me. I can't see a face, just the faint outline of a tall person. My chest tightened, my fingers tightened around Baxter's leash. Then they took a step forward. I began to run. Baxter lunges forward as if he's been waiting for me to break into a sprint. His paws kick up dirt. My heart slams against my ribs as I tear down the path, boots pounding against the ground. I hear the footsteps behind me. Fast, heavy, and closing in. My apartment was just past the clearing, just past the small bridge at the end of the trail. I remember thinking, if I can make it there, if I can just get past the bridge, I'm safe. Then a low, sharp whistle cuts through the air. I almost trip. My stomach twisted and I felt like I had to throw up. Baxter let out a sharp bark, and he nearly pulled me off balance as he dragged me forward. The bridge is ahead. The parking lot was just beyond it. I was almost there. I pushed myself harder, lungs burning and my vision tunneling as I burst into the clearing. A few cars were parked near the edge of the lot. The second my feet hit pavement, I risk a glance back. The man is gone. I stand there, gasping for air, my legs trembling. My ears strain for any sound, any sign that someone is still back there. But there's nothing, just the woods, dark and empty. I fumble for my keys with shaking hands. practically dragging Baxter to my apartment door. The second we're inside, I lock the door, double-checking it twice. I tried to calm myself down. My phone buzzes in my pocket. I nearly drop it. With a deep breath, I pull it out. A new text from an unknown number. "You run fast, Mia." I dropped the phone in shock. I stared at the screen as it laid on the ground. I was trying to process what was happening. How did they get my number? Who was watching me? And then it hits me. If they knew my name, if they were able to text me, then they had to have been close to me at some point in my life. I picked up the phone. My fingers were shaking as I blocked the number, but the chilling thought still lingers. Who had been following me that night? I don't know. All I for sure know is that for the first time in my life, the quiet woods I'd always walked through and felt safe in no longer felt safe. The apartment no longer felt safe. The walls that had protected me now felt suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever it was, whoever had been following me, was still out there, watching, waiting for the next time I stepped out into the woods. My thoughts kept spinning, replaying every moment, every glance over my shoulder, every rustling sound. I thought about calling the police, but what could they do? There were no clear signs, no concrete evidence of anyone being there. No one would take me seriously. I felt alone, more isolated than ever. The apartment seemed so small. Baxter, sensing my unease, curled up beside me on the couch, his head resting on my lap. I stroked his fur absent-mindedly, trying to calm my nerves. But every noise in the night, every little creak or groan of the building made my stomach drop. I could still hear that high-pitched whistle echoing in my mind. I don't ever want to go back to those woods. It started with a curiosity, nothing more than that. A friend of mine, Danny, had been talking about the dark web for weeks. At first I brushed it off. I was just a regular guy living a pretty boring life in a small town. But as Danny kept mentioning it, talking about things he'd seen, the kind of people he'd met, I couldn't help but wonder if I was missing out on something. So I asked him one day, "What's it really like? Is it worth checking out?" He grinned as if he had been waiting for me to ask. "You can't just dive into it like regular browsing. You need the right tools, a special browser, and even then, you're only scratching the surface." He told me about the Tor network, an encrypted way to access hidden parts of the web. I'd heard whispers about it in online forums, but never gave it much thought. I didn't exactly want to end up on some government watch list, but the idea of accessing something that felt forbidden intrigued me. After a few days of thinking about it, I downloaded Tor. The browser was easy to install, and I felt a little rush as I realized I was about to access something that felt secret. I'd spent most of my life on the surface web, where everything felt like it had been sanitized and curated. The deep web, as it's often called, or dark web, felt like the opposite: dark, anonymous, and unregulated. I didn't know what to expect, but I couldn't shake the excitement of stepping into this new world. At first, the dark web seemed like a quieter version of the internet. It didn't look that different, just a little less polished. I saw forums, blogs, and marketplaces that felt just like the ones on the surface web. Only these places felt off, like walking into a shady back alley in a city you don't know, and realizing everyone around you is keeping secrets. I browsed a few forums, read some posts about cryptocurrencies, and scrolled through random marketplaces where you could buy almost anything. There were a few that caught my eye, like weapons, counterfeit IDs, and bizarre services. But it was all a little too much for me, so I stayed on the sidelines, exploring out of pure curiosity. That was when I found a chat room. It wasn't in any of the usual places. I didn't find it on a forum or in any common listings. It just appeared on my screen one night after I had been browsing for hours. A pop-up window appeared with a simple message: "Looking for something darker? Join us." I almost clicked away, thinking it was just a phishing attempt. But something about it intrigued me. I clicked the link. It led me into a private chat room with no registration process, no verification, just a screen filled with scrolling usernames. The chat was fast, like a live stream of messages from people all over the world. Some were in English, others in languages I couldn't understand. People were chatting about things I didn't fully comprehend at first, unusual drugs and mysterious disappearances. Then I saw a message from someone named Watcher39. "You're not here by accident. We've been waiting for you." I thought it was some kind of joke or automated message. But then I saw another post from the same user. "We know why you're here. We know who you are." My heart began to pound. I looked around the chat room, seeing dozens of new messages flying by. Some were normal, others more disturbing. People were talking about underground fight clubs, human trafficking, and bizarre rituals. But I couldn't take my eyes off of Watcher39. I had no idea how they knew who I was. I hadn't given any personal details away. I wasn't even using my real name. But the more I scrolled, the more their messages appeared and the more unsettling they became. "You want to see something real, don't you?" I wanted to leave, but my curiosity made me stay. After a few minutes of silence, another message popped up. This time it was a link. "Click this. You'll understand what we're about." I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't help myself. I clicked the link. It took me to a private video stream. The video showed a person, a man, bound to a chair. His face was covered in blood and his eyes were wide with terror. The camera zoomed in on his face as the words, "Don't look away," flashed across the screen. I felt sick to my stomach. The man in the chair was trying to scream, but the sound was muffled by something that looked like a gag. The scene wasn't gory in the typical sense. It wasn't about the violence. It was the sense of helplessness that terrified me. Was this live, I thought to myself? Suddenly, a soft beep broke the silence. A notification from the chat room. "You're not just watching. You're part of this now." I immediately closed the tab. I tried to exit the chat room, but it wouldn't close. The messages kept coming. More people started typing, urging me to stay and to keep watching. I realized that the more I tried to leave, the more the people in the chat room seemed to demand my attention. "Run from us and you'll regret it," one message said. I had enough. I pulled the plug from my computer. My brain was in overdrive as I thought about what I had just witnessed. I felt like I had crossed a line, like I had opened a door that shouldn't have been opened. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't loose the feeling that someone was watching me. My phone started buzzing with strange messages from anonymous accounts. No real names, just disturbing, cryptic texts. I tried to block the accounts, but they just kept coming. It was like I couldn't escape. And that's when it hit me. The dark web didn't let you leave. Once you entered, you were part of it, whether you wanted to be or not. It wasn't long before I noticed someone lurking outside my apartment, just standing there, staring up at my window in the dead of night. When I tried to confront them, they disappeared before I could even get close. But the messages kept coming. Eventually, I bought a new phone and got a new number. I erased everything on my computer, and only then did the messages stop. If you or someone you know are thinking about trying the dark web, don't. I don't know why I agreed to the overnight shift at the old fire tower. Maybe it was the promise of solitude, or maybe it was just the paycheck. Either way, I found myself standing at the base of the tower, staring up at the rusted staircase spiraling into the darkness. The sun had set an hour ago, and the surrounding forest was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. I tightened my jacket against the cold and started climbing. The tower was old, real old. It creaked with every step I took, and the wind whistled through the metal beams, but it had a vibe to it. However, by the time I reached the top, I was already second-guessing my decision. But the view? The view was incredible. A sea of black treetops stretched endlessly in every direction, and above them the night sky was clear and filled with stars. The cabin at the top of the tower was small, just a desk with an old radio, a pair of binoculars, and a map of the area pinned to the wall. The large windows offered a panoramic view of the forest. I set my thermos of coffee on the desk and settled into the chair, ready for a long and boring night. For the first couple of hours, nothing happened. I scanned the forest below with the binoculars occasionally, looking for any sign of smoke or fire. The radio crackled faintly every now and then, but no one was talking. It was just me, the quiet hum of the night, and the occasional howl of a distant coyote. It wasn't until around midnight that I saw something strange. At first I thought it was a campfire, a faint, flickering light about 2 miles out in the forest. I grabbed the binoculars and tried to get a closer look, but when I focused in on the area, the light wasn't coming from the ground. It was hovering, swaying back and forth like it was floating in midair. Maybe it was a flashlight that reflected in the window in a weird way, or maybe it was a drone, but it could also be a camper that had gotten lost and was wandering through the woods. So I grabbed the radio and called it in just in case. "This is Tower 4. I think I see someone in the forest about 2 miles south. Might be a lost camper or hiker. Over." The response was immediate. "Tower 4, no one's supposed to be out there tonight. Forestry's closed that area for controlled burns next week. Are you sure?" Over. I hesitated. "Yeah, I'm sure. There's a light moving through the trees. It's weird though. It's not steady. Almost looks like it's floating. It might be a drone." Over. The radio crackled with static for a moment before the voice replied. "Keep an eye on it. Let us know if it gets closer." Over. I set the radio down, feeling a knot form in my stomach. The light didn't seem to be moving like a person holding a flashlight. It was too erratic. I watched it for another 5 minutes. It continued to move closer, weaving between the trees. The forest was pitch black, and then suddenly it stopped, right at the edge of the clearing below the tower. I grabbed the binoculars again and focused in on it. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a flashlight or a drone. It wasn't a person. It was a figure, tall. Its skin was pale and almost glowing in the moonlight. The light I'd been seeing wasn't a flashlight. It was coming from its eyes. 2 bright, burning orbs. It was looking right at me. I stumbled back from the window, shocked at what I had seen. What the hell was that thing? I didn't know if I should grab the radio or just run down the stairs and drive out of there. But when I turned back to the window, it was gone. I scanned the clearing frantically, but there was no sign of it, just darkness. I grabbed the radio. "This is Tower 4. I saw something. Not a person, something else. It was in the clearing below the tower. Over." "Tower 4, are you sure you're not seeing things? It's late." Over. "I'm not imagining this," I snapped. There was something out there. It wasn't human. Over. The voice on the other end sounded uneasy. "Stay in the tower, lock the door. We'll send someone out in the morning. Over." I didn't like that answer, but I didn't argue. I locked the door and sat down, trying to calm myself. But the unease didn't go away. An hour passed, then 2. The forest was dead silent now. Not even the wind could be heard. I kept glancing out the windows, half expecting to see the burning eyes staring back at me. But nothing happened. Just as I started to think maybe I'd imagined the whole thing, I heard a creak. It came from the staircase outside. It shocked me to my core. The tower creaked sometimes in the wind, but this wasn't the wind. This was something else. Suddenly, heavy footsteps began ascending the stairs. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it at the door. The footsteps got louder and louder. Then they stopped. I couldn't see anything outside, even with my flashlight on. The door handle turned. In a panic, I ran for my radio and yelled into it as fast as I could. "This is Tower 4. It's here. It's at the door. Send someone now." But before I could hear the response, the door rattled violently, like something was trying to force its way in. I backed into the corner of the room, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. And then it stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. I waited, holding my breath, for what felt like hours. But nothing happened. When dawn finally broke, I found the courage to open the door. There were no footprints, no sign that anyone or anything had been there. But on the ground, right below the watchtower, was a scorch mark. 2 blackened circular patches in the wood, like something had been standing there watching me. I wasn't sure if aliens existed before, but after that shift I had no doubt. Whatever that thing was, it sure wasn't from this planet. I'm just glad it left me alone. I've been a night shift security guard for about 3 years now. It's not a job most people would want, but I've always enjoyed the quiet hours. Sitting alone in the control room, watching the security monitors, it's not exactly exciting, but it's easy money. The building I guard is an office complex, 5 floors mostly empty after 7 p.m. The only people who stay late are the occasional overworked office people, but they're usually out by 10. After that, it's just me and the cameras. The night of the incident started off like any other. I did my rounds at 11 p.m., walking through the empty halls, checking doors, making sure everything was locked up. Nothing unusual. When I got back to the control room, I sat down and started flipping through the security feeds. The monitors are old, grainy, black and white screens, the kind you'd see in some low-budget horror movie. I'd been asking my boss for a new security system with better cameras, but he said it was out of their budget at the moment, and other things took priority. Most of the cameras show the same thing: empty offices, dark hallways, and the parking lot outside. But as I switched to the feed for the 3rd floor hallway, I noticed something strange. There was someone standing there. At first, I thought it was just a glitch. The feed on that camera had been acting up lately, and I figured it was just some weird distortion. But as I leaned closer, I realized it wasn't a glitch. There was a figure standing at the far end of the hallway, just outside the frame of the light. I couldn't make out any details. It was just a dark silhouette. I frowned and picked up the intercom mic. "Hello? Is someone up there?" No response. I switched to another camera that covered the same hallway from a different angle. The figure wasn't there. But when I switched back to the first camera, it was still standing there, completely still. I was confused, so I grabbed my flashlight and headed up to the 3rd floor. I wasn't exactly eager to go up there, but it was my job to check it out. The elevator ride felt like it took forever. When the doors finally slid open, I stepped out into the hallway. It was empty. I walked slowly down the hall, shining my flashlight into every corner. There was nothing out of the ordinary. I made my way to the spot where the figure had been standing on the monitor. It was just an empty stretch of carpeted floor. No signs of anyone being there. So I decided I'd headed back to the control room, feeling uneasy, but telling myself it had to have been some kind of glitch. But when I sat down at the monitors again, my heart nearly stopped. The figure was still there. It hadn't moved. It was still standing at the end of the hallway, in the exact same spot I had just checked. I just stared at the screen. I couldn't explain it. I had just been there. That hallway was empty. I picked up the intercom again. "If someone is up there, you need to leave. The police will be called if you don't comply." No response. I kept watching the screen, waiting for the figure to move, to do anything, but it didn't. Not a single muscle. It just stood there looking at the camera. I switched to every camera I had in the building, trying to see if I could catch it from another angle. But no matter which feed I looked at, the figure only appeared on that one camera. I stayed in the control room for the rest of my shift, too unnerved to go back up there. I kept glancing at the monitor, half expecting the figure to disappear or move, but it never did. Finally, my shift ended, and I left the building as fast as I could. My car was parked near the main entrance, and as I slid into the driver's seat, I glanced back at the office windows out of habit. That's when I saw it. On the 5th floor, in one of the windows, the figure was there, standing perfectly still. I stared at it, unable to look away. It wasn't moving. It was just watching me. I don't know how long I sat there frozen, staring back at it. But eventually I started my car and drove away. I never saw the figure again. Not on the cameras, not in the building, not in the windows. I still work there, and I often think about that night. Maybe it was just a glitch. But if it was a glitch, then who the hell did I see in the window as I was driving away? I was home alone. My parents had gone out to visit some friends, so it was just me. I had no plans for the night, just a quiet evening of scrolling TikTok, maybe playing some video games before crashing in bed. It was around 10 p.m. when I first saw it. I was in the kitchen making a quick snack. The only light was from the fridge as I grabbed a soda. The TV was murmuring from the living room. I shut the fridge, turned, and then peeking around the corner leading into the hallway was a foot. Not mine, not my parents', someone else's. It was bare, motionless, just sticking out from behind the wall, like someone had stepped forward but stopped in their tracks. For a few long seconds, I just stood there, my brain short-circuiting. My first thought was that my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe it was a shadow, maybe my eyes were just adjusting to the dim lighting, but it was definitely real. A cold wave of panic slammed into me. I was supposed to be home alone. Every logical thought disappeared, replaced by sheer terror. I backed away step by step, gripping the counter behind me. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears. I debated making a run for the front door, but what if they were closer than I thought? What if the second I moved, they ran toward me? I needed to get upstairs. The second I hit the stairs, I took them two at a time, nearly tripping over myself in my panic. I made it to my room and slammed the door. I grabbed my phone. I was about to call 911 when I hesitated. I was always taught that 911 should only be called in real emergencies, so, of course, being my young, dumb self, I decided to wait. I needed to know if they were still there. With my heart hammering, I crept toward my door, dropping to my knees and pressing my ear against it. It was silent, but as I listened, footsteps began approaching my door. I covered my mouth to stifle my breathing. They were coming upstairs. I got up and backed away. I did the only thing I could. I slipped behind my bed, crouching low. My phone was still in my hand, my thumb hovering over the call button. I was about to press it when my bedroom door creaked open. I didn't dare to move, didn't dare breathe. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw them. The half of a person slowly appeared in the doorway. He didn't blink, he just stood there not moving, looking at me with a wide eye. I couldn't process what I was seeing. I didn't know what to do. The whole situation was really hard on me and my head was spinning. I was going to pass out. But then, a voice. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" It came from outside. It was my neighbor. She could see him through the stair railing. Whoever, or whatever, was standing in my doorway whipped around and ran. I could hear them run down the stairs and out the back door. I stayed behind my bed for what felt like an eternity, my whole body still shaking. My phone screen was still on, my thumb still hovering over the emergency call button. I pressed it with numb fingers, whispering to the operator that someone had broken into my house. By the time the police arrived, the house was empty. Nothing was taken. No doors or windows were broken. The only sign that someone had been there at all was a bare footprint at the bottom of the stairs. I don't know how they got in. I don't know what they wanted. I can't even think about what would have happened if my neighbor hadn't come over when she did. I was working the night shift in a small suburban hospital. It was my first month as a nurse. I wasn't exactly used to the routine yet, but everything seemed normal until the morning of the incident. Her name was Mrs. Calloway. She had been in the hospital for a few days, recovering from a routine procedure. Nothing too serious, but her condition had been improving steadily. She was a sweet woman, always polite, never complained about anything. I'd spoken to her a few times, and each time, she had the most calm smile on her face. It was early morning when I went to check on her, ready to go through my rounds and start preparing for the day's shift change. Mrs. Calloway had requested to be discharged, and when I reviewed her chart, everything seemed in order. The paperwork was signed, and all the discharge instructions were ready. The doctor had left earlier that night, and I was told everything was good to go. I went into her room and found her sitting up in bed, her back propped against the pillows, hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked peaceful. I greeted her. "Good morning, Mrs. Calloway." She turned her head slightly. "Good morning, dear. I'm ready to go home now." "Of course," I said, scanning her chart one more time. Everything looked normal. "Let's get you settled so we can get you out of here. Are you feeling all right?" "Better than ever," she replied. I helped her into her clothes, and she was surprisingly strong for someone who had just undergone surgery. She dressed quickly, and in a way that felt eerily efficient for a woman her age. When I handed her the discharge papers, she took them without hesitation, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time and was eager to get out. I escorted her to the front desk, where the receptionist processed her release. Mrs. Calloway smiled at the staff as she walked through the doors, and I waved goodbye, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. Later that day, during the shift change, I was talking with another nurse named Jana. She was taking over for me when she asked, "How was Mrs. Calloway? Did she pass peacefully?" "Pass? What do you mean? She left about an hour ago," I replied. Jana's face froze. "She was discharged? But she passed away early this morning." I stared at her, blinking in disbelief. "What? No, I just discharged her. She was fine. She was recovering. Jana gave me a confused look. "No, sweetheart. Mrs. Calloway passed away in her sleep around 3 a.m. It was peaceful, but she's been dead for hours." I felt my stomach turn. The blood drained from my face. "But I talked to her. She was right there. She was awake, she was smiling, she was..." Jana's expression softened as she placed a hand on my shoulder. "You must have been tired. Maybe it was just a mix-up, or you saw someone else. That happens sometimes." But I knew what I had seen. There was no mistake. Mrs. Calloway had been there, and she was alive. Or was she? I rushed to check the records again, hoping for some kind of explanation. But the truth was there, plain and simple. Mrs. Calloway had passed away at 3 a.m., just a couple of hours before I helped her out of the hospital. I couldn't understand it. How could I have missed it? I went to her room hoping to find some answer, but all I found was the lingering scent of flowers and antiseptic. The bed was empty. Her belongings were gone. The nurse who had replaced me had already cleared everything out, but on the small nightstand by the bed, there was a folded piece of paper tucked under the lamp. I picked it up. It was a note, written in neat handwriting. "Thank you for taking such good care of me. I'll be fine now. I'm ready to go home." I dropped the note, and it fluttered to the floor. My heart hammered in my chest as I couldn't believe what was happening. I knew then that Mrs. Calloway hadn't just been discharged. She had left, just like she had written in the note, but on her own terms. I never spoke about it to anyone else. I couldn't. The hospital would never believe me, and honestly, I don't think I could convince myself of what had happened, let alone anyone else. But every night since that shift, when I walk by a patient's room late at night, I swear I hear her soft, serene voice calling me. Urban exploration was my guilty pleasure. Nothing illegal or reckless, just slipping into places that had been left behind. Abandoned factories were my favorite. The cavernous spaces, the layers of graffiti, the eerie silence. It was like stepping into a world forgotten by time. There was an old textile factory on the edge of my town. People said it was dangerous, that the building was falling apart, but I couldn't resist. It had stood there for decades. An evening in late summer last year, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I climbed through a gap in the rusted fence and made my way inside. I had my camera slung around my neck, ready to capture the desolation. The factory was everything I hoped it would be. Vast empty rooms, machinery frozen in time, and peeling paint clinging to the walls. I wandered for hours, snapping photos, losing myself in the quietness. But as I turned a corner, something caught my eye. It was a faint light flickering from a small basement window. It was starting to get dark outside, so the light immediately stood out to me. It didn't make sense. The factory had been abandoned for years. There shouldn't have been electricity, let alone a working light. So my curiosity got the better of me. I found the staircase leading down to the basement where the light was. The basement was colder than the rest of the building. The air felt damp and thick with the smell of mold. I grabbed my flashlight tightly as I descended. When I reached the bottom, I saw it. A single bulb hanging from the ceiling, swaying gently. It shouldn't have been on. The basement was cluttered with debris, broken chairs, old filing cabinets, tools scattered across the floor. But there was something off about the space, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I was about to raise my camera to capture the scene, but just as I raised it, the light went out. Pitch black darkness swallowed the room. I froze. My flashlight was in my bag. As I was about to reach for it, I heard footsteps. They were slow, but coming closer, descending the same staircase I had just come down. My throat went dry. I hadn't seen or heard anyone else in the building. I'd been completely alone. Or so I thought. The steps grew louder, closer. I finally managed to grab my flashlight and flick it on. I pointed it toward the staircase, but there was no one there. But the footsteps kept coming. Panic surged through me. The steps didn't make sense. They were right there, just a few feet away, but there was nothing to see. Just empty air and the staircase. "Hello?" My voice cracked as I called out. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, the silence returned. But then, from the shadows at the far end of the room, I heard a faint scraping sound. I swung my flashlight toward the noise. It came from an old cabinet. I wanted to leave. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate and curiosity got the better of me. Slowly, I edged closer to the cabinet. The scraping stopped as I was a few feet away. I reached out with a shaking hand, gripping the handle of the top drawer. My breath hitched as I pulled it open. This didn't make sense to me. Suddenly, a cold breath tickled the back of my neck. My flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, I heard a whisper.
"You're gonna die here,"
it said. I spun around, but there was no one there. The footsteps started again, this time circling me. Faster, louder, closer. I dropped the flashlight and ran as fast as I could. I didn't care where I was going, only that I needed to get out. My feet pounded against the floor as I scrambled up the staircase. I didn't stop. I ran until I was outside in the cold night air. To this day, I don't know what I encountered in that basement. I didn't believe in the paranormal before, but after this, I'm not so sure anymore.